guys, it's May from Markets with May, and this is episode 3 of Why is the SEC suing Binance and Coinbase? In this video, we're going to talk specifically about the Binance lawsuit, and I am going to put the link in the comments below to the actual document that the SEC filed. The lawsuits between Binance and Coinbase do in fact differ, and it's clear to me from the document that at a minimum, Binance employees are acting as whistleblowers. Now, it also seems potentially true that FTX is also potentially a whistleblower. They are mentioned in one spot in the analysis, which I will highlight as well in the comments and show notes below. In contrast, in episode 4, I will go through the Coinbase lawsuit and where it's different. My suspicion is they simply don't have whistleblowers at this point in Coinbase, but given how the two are written, you get the sense that the SEC potentially believes that Coinbase is also doing this activity. But short of having whistleblowers at Coinbase, they would be looking forward to discovery, helping them identify whether or not the issues that are endemic in Binance are also potentially present in Coinbase. And going backwards a little bit, you will want the jargon that was presented in episode 1 on staking as a service, and episode 2 precisely what it is about registering a broker-dealer, exchange, and clearinghouse, separating those functions, what precisely that does to protect investors. And you'll need that if for no other reason that almost all of the media that I'm looking at is focusing on the idea that certain coins are securities and certain coins are not. That's actually not even really a part of these two documents. I mean, it is in the smallest of ways. But the real thing that both Binance and Coinbase are offering as a security that each of the documents focuses in on is proof of staking as a service. The focus on whether coins broadly are securities is a red herring because it's actually not the main thrust of either of these lawsuits. Episode 5, I am going to go through the issue regardless on what constitutes a commodity, utility, or security token. But like I said, it's irrelevant to understanding why it is the SEC is trying to shut down both Coinbase, the US operations, as well as Binance's US operations. But first, the disclosures. Past performance is not indicative of future returns. I am not telling you to do anything. As far as that goes, you should do your own due diligence, which is why I've included all the links below. As relates to the exchanges, I have no position in Binance, nor have I ever. Coinbase, I have been both long and short, but right now my bias is short. And though I don't have a position at this time, I could potentially have a short position in the future, particularly given what I'm hearing. And also, as relates to cryptocurrency itself, I have positions in BITO. I do have, which is a Bitcoin ETF. I have Satoshis, XRP, and Ethereum. Also, it'd be amazing if you could like, share, comment, or subscribe to my channel. This is a 5-part series, so it will be the best way for you to get notification. Now let's get into precisely what it is the SEC is suing Binance for doing. The lawsuit for Binance is about 35 pages longer than the lawsuit that was filed against Coinbase, and it is crystal clear from the document that there are whistleblowers for Binance. And if we were confused about that, there are 2-page references that I will post below, one of which discusses exactly the frustration that was experienced by the CEO A as they call it, and all of the documentation it's clear she probably brought with her. Additionally, there's even reference to an internal project called Project 1776. And Project 1776 was clearly created by the US CEO to separate Binance US from Binance International, called Binance.com, throughout the document. Now, while the Binance document and the Coinbase lawsuit can stand by themselves as documents, the truth is, if you read the Binance document, it clarifies precisely why there's additional concerns at Coinbase. Now, as we'll discuss in the next episode, there have been no whistleblowers that have provided further information. But given what Binance is doing, and given the similarities in the corporate structures that have been created, it's clear to me that if this goes to court, in discovery, the SEC is going to request all sorts of documentation to demonstrate that the two companies are acting approximately the same way. Now, the issue that the SEC has really surrounds 4 different claims. And it is kind of hard to drag it out of the document because the document's purpose is to demonstrate not only did Binance do these activities, but also they did so knowingly and with malintent. Additionally, for someone reading this document, what makes it difficult is these 4 approximate groupings of claims are interspersed throughout the document. And that's because some of the things they're doing are only possible because they're also doing the other 3 somewhat illegal activities. And the 4 claims are these. First, they knowingly issued BNB as a security. Second, they knowingly created a broker-dealer clearinghouse and exchange combined function that they knew needed to be regulated by the United States, but went ahead and did it anyway. Claim 3 surrounds the idea that given 1 and 2, they knowingly created a corporate structure that allowed for money laundering. Claim 4 is that they knowingly, given 1, 2, and 3, created a structure that made it very easy to commit what the US would consider is securities fraud. So let's start with the first grouping of claims, which is that BNB is a security and Binance knowingly issued it in violation of federal law. Now, I want to remind people that you can raise capital overseas all you want, but you can't do it in the US without complying with federal law. Now, this set of claims starts in the first 2 pages of the document. So any of the news organizations that misreported this, I know you didn't read this lawsuit document. Now, the first part of this claim, which comes very early in the document, is the idea that they were very clear that the use of proceeds on the token would be to build out the infrastructure of Binance and Binance US. Now, I'm no lawyer, but that does sound a lot like you're raising capital to build out a company to me. The second part of this claim, that they didn't do any kind of due diligence as relates to the folks that came in and bought on the deal. Now, this is further discussed in Claim 3 as relates to KYC. But we'll get to that. Now, the third part of this claim is that those that bought the coin reasonably believed that the upside on the coin had to do with Binance building itself up into a bigger company. And if that's true, if that's what most people believed when they bought BNB, then I do think it's hard to claim that you didn't know that you were a security or that you weren't offering securities for sale. Now, I will talk about this more in part 5 of this series. We do differentiate between gold traded on the commodity exchange and gold equity companies that are traded on a stock exchange. And to further clarify that, a lot of raw material equities companies, despite the fact that the raw material itself is in the ground and provides some asset value, do actually trade differently than the commodity itself at times. And it might have to do with operating issues that would result in a loss even if the commodity itself is doing really well. Now, Claim 2 is a grouping of different comments in the document that Binance not only knew they were supposed to register Binance US as an exchange, a broker-dealer, and as a clearinghouse, but they didn't do it particularly because of Claim 3 and Claim 4, which I'll go through. Now, the initial part of this is found again within the first few pages, but really takes hold on page 27, where they describe that Binance hired a consultant to specifically skirt US law. Now, they describe the idea that Binance US was created to essentially absorb any regulation impact that might one day come if the SEC took action against Binance. It describes a series of corporate structures that would allow Binance.com, the international entity, to continue to more or less fully manage Binance. Now, it additionally has multiple examples of how Binance US was not conducted in a manner that was arm's length from Binance International. And it even describes that data couldn't even be accessed without going to the international entity, and the international entity had discretion as to whether or not to give it back to the US entity for whatever use case they might need it for. Now, this is quite a bit different than FTX Ledger X, which was fully separated from FTX International. Now let's talk about the third set of claims that are made, and really these relate to money laundering. Now, there are going to be some people that get a little bit upset with me for taking liberty on calling it money laundering, because he does mention in the document money laundering specifically, but not across all these different points. And what I have to say to you is this: if that specific line item refers to money traveling from the US internally through the organization to Binance International, bypassing KYC, bypassing US regulation, then that is something that is referencing the potential for money laundering. Now, they do talk about it as early as page 3 when they discuss the fact that Binance US and Binance.com had considerable commingling of organizational, managerial, and other data transfer type structures. But it gets really ugly on page 33, where they describe this VIP service at Binance. Now, this VIP marketing group was designed to provide client service to those that were high frequency traders on the platform, was to help them walk through how to change their KYC documents, or alternatively to facilitate anything they might need as relates to setting up entities offshore. Now, here on the top of page 29, you can see that they were exempting customers that were limited to withdrawing 2 Bitcoin a day from any need for KYC. That's $50,000 a day. Now, you add on top of that the idea that if you're not properly KYCing, a single person or entity can have an infinite number of accounts. This is why the SEC is upset with Binance. Now let's talk about the 4th set of claims, and these all surround what constitutes investor fraud. Now, this also starts early in the document. Page 9 through 12 begins almost immediately describing the idea that Binance made claims to having certain investor controls that just were not there. On page 8, it then talks about the idea that solicitation specifically for BNB went to everyone regardless of whether or not they were accredited investors. Page 14 talks about the idea that there was incentive to trade against investors as well as ability to do. Now, in episode 1, we talk about staking as a service and the idea that when you stake as a service, your coins move from your ownership into the exchange's ownership at the current time. Now, a regulated entity has to segregate that through the entire period of how it's owned, who it's owned, and how it's used. But a crypto entity is not regulated. So what they're saying, and some of the whistleblowers confirm, is that that transfer of ownership went straight into a Binance entity, which then traded against accounts. Now, then they have a lot to say about Sigma Chain, which essentially is the part of the U.S. entity that did market making on behalf of Binance US. They talk about the fact that at any given time, Sigma Chain was typically the only market maker, except at one point, FTX's Alameda was also a market maker. But as you all know, that blew up in a blaze of glory. Now, if you only have 2 market makers, it's a real question mark whether you're doing anything remotely related to best execution. You're not even using Coinbase as your counterparty. And it would be very interesting to hear from Coinbase internal folks if they want to come clean as to whether or not there's any concept of best execution for anyone trading on that platform. Now, finally, they described the use of wash sales to fake volume, and in some days it was as high as 1/3 the daily volume. Now, they also hint at the idea that front running is happening, and they don't make the strongest case in the document itself. I'm sure that if this goes to trial, we'll hear very clearly what the SEC meant by front running, but that really is moving the marks around and then forcing you to buy it at a price that you shouldn't, and they basically take all the profitability of that, both at the market maker, by the way, and also to the extent that they actually own the shares that they just sold to you at a higher price. But they also go further in this document to describe how staking as a service is also how Binance got so much crypto that they then used to trade against customers on. Now, the final thing they point out is that Binance US did have an auditor, but when the auditor went in to just try to get a count for how many coins there were to see if that matched how many clients had those coins in custody, they just couldn't ever at any given single point in time get an accurate count. But those are the reasons that the SEC is suing Binance. It is not, as the press would like you to believe, because they suddenly flipped the switch and certain coins that were commodities are now securities. That's not it at all. Now, in the next episode, I'm going to talk about the Coinbase lawsuit, what's in it, what's not in it, and also what's this famous appeal they keep saying is the reason why the SEC is coming after them. Additionally, you can find the previous 2 episodes here along with all the other videos I've ever done on Web3 crypto and NFTs. And finally, if you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate a like, share, comment, subscribe, and I want to shout out to those that gave me a special thanks on my previous episodes. I super appreciate it. That's all for now. Hope to see you in the next episode.